Relax and listen to the voice. Welcome back once again to the Fairy Tales of Hans Christian Andersen, Volume 23. Once again, we'd like to ask you to please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment on the videos. This helps our channel grow, and we greatly appreciate it. Well, alright, here we go. The Old Bachelor's Nightcap. There is a street in Copenhagen with a very strange name. It is called Heisken Street. Where the name came from and what it means is very uncertain. It is said to be German, but that is unjust to the Germans, for it would then be called Haschen, not Heisken. Haschen means a little house, and for many years it consisted only of a few small houses, which were scarcely larger than the wooden booths we see in the marketplaces at fair time. They were perhaps a little higher and had windows, but the panes consisted of horn or bladder skins, for glass was then too dear to have glazed windows in every house. This was a long time ago. So long indeed that our grandfathers and even great-grandfathers would speak of those days as the olden times. Indeed, many centuries have passed since then. The rich merchants in Bremen and Lübeck who carried on trade in Copenhagen did not reside in the town themselves, but sent their clerks who dwelt in the wooden booths in the Haschen Street and sold beer and spices. The German beer was very good, and there were many sorts, from Bremen, Prussia, and Brunswick, and quantities of all sorts of spices, saffron, anise seed, ginger, and especially pepper. Indeed, pepper was almost the chief article sold here, so it happened at last that the German clerks in Denmark got their nickname of pepper gentry. It had been made a condition with these clerks that they should not marry, so that those who lived to be old had to take care of themselves, to attend to their own comforts, and even to light their own fires when they had any to light. Many of them were very aged, lonely old boys with strange thoughts and eccentric habits. From this, all unmarried men who have attained a certain age are called, in Denmark, pepper gentry, and this must be remembered by all those who wish to understand the story. These pepper gentlemen, or as they are called in England, old bachelors, are often made a butt of ridicule. They are told to put on their nightcaps, draw them over their eyes, and go to sleep. The boys in Denmark made a song of it, thus: "Poor old bachelor, cut your wood. Such a nightcap was never seen. Who would think it was ever clean? Go to sleep, it will do you good." So they sing about the pepper gentleman. So do they make sport of the old poor bachelor and his nightcap, and all because they really know nothing of either. It is a cap that no one need wish for or laugh at. And why not? Well, we shall hear in the story. In olden times, Haschen Street was not paved, and passengers would stumble out of one hole into another, as they generally do in unfrequented highways. And the street was so narrow, and the booths, leaning against each other, were so close together that in the summertime a sail would be stretched across the street from one booth to another opposite. At these times the odor of the pepper, saffron, and ginger became more powerful than ever. Behind the counter, as a rule, there were no young men. The clerks were almost all old boys, but they did not dress as we are accustomed to see old men represented, wearing wigs, nightcaps and knee breeches, and with coat and waistcoat buttoned up to the chin. We have seen the portraits of our great-grandfathers dressed in this way, but the Pepper gentlemen had no money to spare to have their portraits taken, though one of them would have made a very interesting picture for us now, if taken as he appeared standing behind his counter, or going to church, or on holidays. On these occasions, they wore high-crowned, broad-rimmed hats, and sometimes a younger clerk would stick a feather in his. The woolen shirt was concealed by a broad linen collar. The close jacket was buttoned up to the chin, and the cloak hung loosely over it. The trousers were tucked into the broad-tipped shoes, for the clerks wore no stockings. They generally stuck a table knife and spoon in their girdles, as well as a larger knife, as a protection to themselves, and such a weapon was often very necessary. After this fashion was Anthony, dressed on holidays and festivals, excepting that, instead of a high-crowned hat, he wore a kind of bonnet, and under it a knitted cap, a regular nightcap, to which he was so accustomed that it was always on his head. He had two, nightcaps I mean, not heads. Anthony was one of the oldest of the clerks, and just the subject for a painter. He was as thin as a lath, wrinkled around the mouth and eyes, had long, bony fingers, bushy gray eyebrows, and over his left eye hung a thick tuft of hair, which did not look handsome, but made his appearance very remarkable. People knew that he had come from Bremen. It was not exactly his home, although his master resided there. His ancestors were from Thuringia, and had lived in the town of Eisenach, close by Wartburg. Old Anthony seldom spoke of this place, but he thought of it all the more. The old clerks of Hoschen Street very seldom met together. Each one remained in his own booth, which was closed early enough in the evening, and then it looked dark and dismal out in the street. Only a faint glimmer of light struggled through the horn panes in a little window on the roof, while within sat the old clerk, generally on his bed, singing his evening hymn in a low voice, or he would be moving about in his booth till late in the night, busily employed in many things. It certainly was not a very lively existence. To be a stranger in a strange land is a bitter lot. No one notices you unless you happen to stand in their way. Often, when it was dark night outside, with rain or snow falling, the place looked quite deserted and gloomy. There were no lamps in the street, excepting a very small one which hung at one end of the street before a picture of the Virgin which had been painted on the wall. The dashing of the water against the bulwarks of the neighboring castle could plainly be heard. Such evenings are long and dreary, unless people can find something to do, and so Anthony found it. There were not always things to be packed or unpacked, nor paper bags to be made, nor the scales to be polished, so Anthony invented employment. He mended his clothes and patched his boots, and when he at last went to bed, his nightcap, which he had worn from habit, still remained on his head. He had only to pull it down a little further over his forehead. Very soon, however, it would be pushed up again to see if the light was properly put out. He would touch it, press the wick together, and at last pull his nightcap over his eyes and lie down again on the other side. But often there would arise in his mind a doubt as to whether every coal had been quite put out in the little fire pan in the shop below. If even a tiny spark had remained, it might set fire to something and cause great damage. Then he would rise from his bed, creep down the ladder, for it could scarcely be called a flight of stairs, and when he reached the fire pan, not a spark could be seen, so he had just to go back again to bed. But often, when he had got halfway back, he would fancy the iron shutters of the door were not properly fastened, and his thin legs would carry him down again. And when he at last crept into bed, he would be so cold that his teeth chattered in his head. He would draw the coverlet close around him, pull his nightcap over his eyes, and try to turn his thoughts from trade and from the labors of the day to olden times. But this was scarcely an agreeable entertainment, for thoughts of olden memories raise the curtains from the past, and sometimes pierce the heart with painful recollections till the agony brings tears to the waking eyes. And so it was with Anthony. Often the scalding tears, like pearly drops, would fall from his eyes to the coverlet and roll on the floor with a sound as if one of his heartstrings had broken. Sometimes, with a lurid flame, memory would light up a picture of life which had never faded from his heart. If he dried his eyes with his nightcap, then the tear and the picture would be crushed, but the source of the tears remained and welled up again in his heart. The pictures did not follow one another in order as the circumstances they represented had occurred. Very often the most painful would come together, and when those came which were the most full of joy, they had always the deepest shadow thrown upon them. The beech woods of Denmark are acknowledged by everyone to be very beautiful, but more beautiful still in the eyes of old Anthony were the beech woods in the neighborhood of Wartburg. More grand and venerable to him seemed the old oaks around the proud baronial castle, where the creeping plants hung over the stony summits of the rocks. Sweeter was the perfume there of the apple blossom than in all the land of Denmark. How vividly were represented to him, in a glittering tear that rolled down his cheek, two children at play, a boy and a girl. The boy had rosy cheeks, golden ringlets, and clear blue eyes. He was the son of Anthony, a rich merchant. It was himself. The little girl had brown eyes and black hair, and was clever and courageous. She was the mayor's daughter, Molly. The children were playing with an apple. They shook the apple and heard the pips rattling inside of it. Then they cut it in two, and each of them took half. They also divided the pips and ate all but one, which the little girl proposed should be placed in the ground.
"You will see what will come out,"
she said.
"Something you don't expect. A whole apple tree will come out, but not directly."
Then they got a flower pot, filled it with earth, and were soon both very busy and eager about it. The boy made a hole in the earth with his finger, and the little girl placed the pip in the hole, and then they both covered it with the earth.
"Now, you must not take it out tomorrow to see if it has taken root,"
said Molly.
"No one ever should do that. I did so with my flowers, but only twice. I wanted to see if they were growing. I didn't know any better, and the flowers all died."
Little Anthony kept the flower pot, and every morning during the whole winter he looked at it, but there was nothing to be seen but black earth. At last, however, the spring came, and the sun shone warm again, and then two little green leaves sprouted forth in the pot.
"They're Molly and me,"
said the boy.
"How wonderful they are, and so beautiful."
Very soon a third leaf made its appearance.
"Who does that stand for?"
thought he, and then came another and another, day after day and week after week, till the plant became quite a tree. And all this about the two children was mirrored to old Anthony in a single tear, which could soon be wiped away and disappear, but might come again from its source in the heart of the old man. In the neighborhood of Eisenach stretches a ridge of stony mountains, one of which has a rounded outline and shows itself above the rest without tree, bush, or grass on its barren summits. It is called Venus Mountain, and the story goes that the Lady Venus, one of the heathen goddesses, keeps house there. She is also called Lady Halle, as every child round Eisenach well knows. She was who incited the noble knight Tannhauser, the minstrel from the circle of singers at Wartburg, into her mountain. Little Molly and Anthony often stood by this mountain, and one day Molly said,
"Do you dare to knock and say, 'Lady Halle, Lady Halle, open the door, Tannhauser is here'?"
But Anthony did not dare. Molly, however, did, though she only said the words, "Lady Halle, Lady Halle," loudly and distinctly. The rest she muttered so much under her breath that Anthony felt certain she had really said nothing, and yet she looked quite bold and saucy, just as she did sometimes when she was in the garden with a number of other little girls. They would all stand round him together and want to kiss him, because he did not like to be kissed, and pushed them away. Then Molly was the only one who dared to resist him.
"I may kiss him,"
she would say proudly, as she threw her arms round his neck. She was vain of her power over Anthony, for he would submit quietly and think nothing of it. Molly was very charming, but rather bold, and how she did tease! They said Lady Halle was beautiful, but her beauty was that of a tempting fiend. Saint Elizabeth, the tutelar saint of the land, the pious princess of Thuringia, whose good deeds have been immortalized in so many places through stories and legends, had greater beauty and more real grace. Her picture hung in the chapel, surrounded by silver lamps, but it did not in the least resemble Molly. The apple tree which the two children had planted grew year after year, till it became so large that it had to be transplanted into the garden where the dew fell and the sun shone warmly, and there it increased in strength so much as to be able to withstand the cold of winter, and after passing through a severe weather, it seemed to put forth its blossoms in spring for very joy that the cold season had gone. In autumn it produced 2 apples, one for Molly and one for Anthony. It could not well do less. The tree after this grew very rapidly, and Molly grew with the tree. She was as fresh as an apple blossom, but Anthony was not to behold this flower for long. All things change. Molly's father left his old home, and Molly went with him far away. In our time, it would be only a journey of a few hours, but then it took more than a day and a night to travel so far eastward from Eisenbach to a town called Weimar on the borders of Thuringia. And Molly and Anthony both wept, but these tears all flowed together into one tear which had the rosy shimmer of joy. Molly had told him that she loved him more than all the splendors of Weimar. 1, 2, 3 years went by, and during the whole time he received only 2 letters. One came by the carrier, and the other a traveler brought. The way was very long and difficult, with many turnings and windings through towns and villages. How often had Anthony and Molly heard the story of Tristan and Isolde, and Anthony had thought the story applied to him, although Tristan means born in sorrow, which Anthony certainly was not, nor was it likely he would ever say of Molly as Tristan said of Isolde.
She has forgotten me.
But in truth, Isolde had not forgotten him, her faithful friend, and when both were laid in their graves, one on each side of the church, the linden trees that grew by each grave spread over the roof, and bending towards each other, mingled their blossoms together. Anthony thought it a very beautiful but mournful story, yet he never feared anything so sad would happen to him and Molly, as he passed the spot, whistling the air of a song composed by the minstrel Walter, called The Willow Bird, beginning, "Under the linden trees, out on the heath." One stanza pleased him exceedingly. "Through the forest and in the vale, sweetly warbles the nightingale." This song was often in his mouth, and he sung or whistled it on a moonlit night, when he rode on horseback along the deep, hollow way on his road to Weimar to visit Molly. He wished to arrive unexpectedly, and so indeed he did. He was received with a hearty welcome, and introduced to plenty of grand and pleasant company, where overflowing wine cups were passed about. A pretty room and a good bed were provided for him, and yet his reception was not what he had expected and dreamed it would be. He could not comprehend his own feelings, nor the feelings of others, but it is easily understood how a person can be admitted into a house or a family without becoming one of them. We converse in company with those we meet, as we converse with our fellow travelers in a stagecoach, on a journey. We know nothing of them, and perhaps all the while we are incommoding one another, and each is wishing himself or his neighbor away. Something of this kind Anthony felt when Molly talked to him of old times.
"I am a straightforward girl," she said, "and I will tell you myself how it is. There have been great changes since we were children together. Everything is different, both inwardly and outwardly. We cannot control our wills, nor the feelings of our hearts, by the force of custom. Anthony, I would not, for the world, make an enemy of you when I am far away. Believe me, I entertain you for the kindest wishes in my heart. But to feel for you what I now know can be felt for another man can never be. You must try to reconcile yourself to this. Farewell, Anthony."
Anthony also said farewell. Not a tear came into his eye. He felt he was no longer Molly's friend. Hot iron and cold iron alike take the skin from our lips, and we feel the same sensations if we kiss either, and Anthony's kiss was now the kiss of hatred, as it had once been the kiss of love. Within 24 hours, Anthony was back again to Eisenach, though the horse that he rode was entirely ruined. "What matters it?" said he. "I'm ruined also. I will destroy everything that can remind me of her, or of Lady Hallie, or Lady Venus, the heathen woman. I will break down the apple tree and tear it up by the roots. Never more shall it blossom or bear fruit." The apple tree was not broken down, for Anthony himself was struck with a fever, which caused him to break down and confined him to his bed. But something occurred to raise him up again. What was it? A medicine was offered to him, which he was obliged to take. A bitter remedy, at which the sick body and the oppressed spirit alike shuddered. Anthony's father lost all his property, and from being known as one of the richest merchants, he became very poor. Dark days, heavy trials, with poverty at the door, came rolling into the house upon them like the waves of the sea. Sorrow and suffering deprived Anthony's father of his strength, so that he had something else to think of besides nursing his love sorrows and his anger against Molly. He had to take his father's place, to give orders, to act with energy, to help, and at last, to go out into the world and earn his bread. Anthony went to Bremen, and there he learnt what poverty and hard living really were. These things often harden the character, but sometimes soften the heart, even too much. How different the world and the people in it appeared to Anthony now to what he had thought in his childhood. What to him were the minstrel songs? An echo of the past, sounds long vanished. At times he would think in this way, yet again and again the songs would sound in his soul, and his heart became gentle and pious. "God's will is the best," he would then say. "It was well that I was not allowed to keep my power over Molly's heart, and that she did not remain true to me. How I should have felt it now, when fortune has deserted me. She left me before she knew of the change in my circumstances, or had a thought of what was before me. That is merciful providence for me. All has happened for the best. She could not help it, and yet I have been so bitter and in such enmity against her." Years passed by. Anthony's father died, and strangers lived in the old house. He had seen it once again since then. His rich master sent him on journeys for business, and on one occasion his way led him to his native town of Eisenach. The old Wartburg castle stood unchanged on the rock where the monk and the nun were hewn out of the stone. The great oaks formed an outline to the scene which he so well remembered in his childhood. The Venus Mountains stood out gray and bare, overshadowing the valley beneath. He would have been glad to call out, Lady Hallie, unlock the mountain. I would fain remain here, always in my native soil." That was a sinful thought, and he offered a prayer to drive it away. Then a little bird in the thicket sang out clearly, and old Anthony thought of the minstrel's song. How much came back to his remembrance as he looked through the tears once more on his native town. The old house was still standing as in olden times, but the garden had been greatly altered. A pathway led through a portion of the ground, and outside the garden and beyond the path stood the old apple tree, which he had not broken down, although he talked of doing so in his trouble. The sun still threw its rays upon the tree, and the refreshing dew fell upon it as of old, and it was so overloaded with fruit that the branches bent towards the earth with the weight. "That flourishes still," said he as he gazed. One of the branches of the tree had, however, been broken. Mischievous hands must have done this in passing, for the tree now stood in a public thoroughfare. "The blossoms are often plucked," said Anthony. "The fruit is stolen, and the branches broken, without a thankful thought of their profusion and beauty. It might be said of a tree, as it has been said of some men, it was not predicted at his cradle that he should come to this. How brightly began the history of this tree, and what is it now? Forsaken and forgotten, in a garden by a hedge in the field, and close to the public road. There it stands, unsheltered, plundered, and broken. It certainly has not yet withered, but in the course of years the number of blossoms from time to time will grow less, and at last it will cease altogether to bear fruit, and then its history will be over." Such were Anthony's thoughts as he stood under the tree, and during many a long night, as he lay in his lonely chamber in the wooden house on Haaschen Street, Copenhagen, in the foreign land to which the rich merchant of Bremen, his employer, had sent him on condition that he should never marry. Marry! And he laughed bitterly to himself at the thought. Winter one year set in early, and it was freezing hard. Without, a snowstorm made everyone remain at home who could do so. Thus it happened that Anthony's neighbors, who lived opposite to him, did not notice that his house remained unopened for 2 days, and that he had not showed himself during that time, for who would go out in such weather unless he were obliged to do so? They were gray, gloomy days, and in the house whose windows were not glass, twilight and dark nights reigned in turns. During these 2 days, old Anthony had not left his bed. He had not had the strength to do so. The bitter weather had for some time affected his limbs. There lay the old bachelor, forsaken by all and unable to help himself. He could scarcely reach the water jug that he had placed by his bed, and the last drop was gone. It was not fever nor sickness, but old age that had laid him low. In the little corner where his bed lay, he was overshadowed, as it were, by perpetual night. A little spider, which he could however not see, busily and cheerfully spun its web above him, so that there should be a kind of little banner waving over the old man when his eyes closed. The time passed slowly and painfully. He had no tears to shed, and he felt no pain. No thought of Molly came into his mind. He felt as if the world was now nothing to him, as if he were lying beyond it, with no one to think of him. Now and then he felt slight sensations of hunger and thirst, but no one came to him. No one tended him. He thought of all those who had once suffered from starvation, of Saint Elizabeth, who once wandered on the earth, the saints of his home and his childhood, the noble Duchess of Thuringia, that highly esteemed lady who visited the poorest villages, bringing hope and relief to the sick inmates. The recollection of her pious deeds was as light to the soul of poor Anthony. He thought of her as she went about, speaking words of comfort, binding up the wounds of the afflicted, and feeding the hungry, although often blamed for it by her stern husband. He remembered a story told of her, that on one occasion, when she was carrying a basket full of wine and provisions, her husband, who had watched her footsteps, stepped forward and asked her angrily what she carried in the basket, whereupon, with fear and trembling, she answered, "Roses which I have plucked from the garden." Then he tore away the cloth which covered the basket, and what could equal the surprise of the pious woman to find that by a miracle everything in her basket, the wine, the bread, had all been changed into roses. In this way the memory of the kind lady dwelt in the calm mind of Anthony. She was as a living reality in his little dwelling in a Danish land. He uncovered his face that he might look into her gentle eyes, while everything around him changed from its look of poverty and want to a bright rose tint. The fragrance of roses spread through the room, mingled with the sweet smell of apples. He saw the branches of an apple tree spreading above him. It was the tree which he and Molly had planted together. The fragrant leaves of the tree fell upon him and cooled his burning brow. Upon his parched lips they seemed like refreshing bread and wine, and as they rested on his breast, a peaceful calm stole over him, and he felt inclined to sleep. "I shall sleep now," he whispered to himself. "Sleep will do me good. In the morning I shall be upon my feet again, strong and well. Glorious, wonderful! That apple tree, planted in love, now appears before me in heavenly beauty." And he slept. The following day, the third day during which his house had been closed, the snowstorm ceased. Then his opposite neighbor stepped over to the house in which old Anthony lived, for he had not yet showed himself. There he lay, stretched on his bed, dead, with his old nightcap tightly clasped in his two hands. The nightcap, however, was not placed on his head in his coffin. He had a clean white one on then. Where now were the tears he had shed? What had become of those wonderful pearls? They were in the nightcap still. Such tears as these cannot be washed out, even when the nightcap is forgotten. The old thoughts and dreams of a bachelor's nightcap still remain. Never wish for such a nightcap. It would make your forehead hot, cause your pulse to beat with agitation, and conjure up dreams which would appear realities. The first who wore old Anthony's cap felt the truth of this, though it was half a century afterwards. That man was the mayor himself, who had already made a comfortable home for his wife and 11 children by his industry. The moment he put the cap on, he dreamed of unfortunate love, of bankruptcy, and of dark days. "Hello! How the nightcap burns!" he exclaimed as he tore it from his head. Then a pearl rolled out, and then another, and another, and they glittered and sounded as they fell. "What can this be? Is it paralysis or something dazzling my eyes?" They were the tears which old Anthony had shed half a century before. To everyone who afterwards put this cap on his head came visions and dreams which agitated him not a little. His own history was changed into that of Anthony till it became quite a story. And many stories might be made of others, so we will leave them to relate their own. We have told the first, and our last word is, don't wish for a bachelor's nightcap. The Last Dream of the Old Oak. In the forest, high up on the steep shore, and not far from the open sea-coast, stood a very old oak tree. It was just 365 years old, but that long time was to the tree as the same number of days might be to us. We awake by day and sleep by night, and then we have our dreams. It is different with the tree. It is obliged to keep awake through 3 seasons of the year, and does not get any sleep till winter comes. Winter is its time for rest, its night after the long day of spring, summer, and autumn. On many a warm summer, the ephemera, the flies that exist for only a day, had fluttered about the old oak, enjoyed life and felt happy, and if, for a moment, one of these tiny creatures rested on one of his large, fresh leaves, the tree would always say, "Poor little creature, Your whole life consists only of a single day. How very short. It must be quite melancholy.
Melancholy? What do you mean?
The little creature would always reply.
Everything around me is so wonderfully bright and warm and beautiful that it makes me joyous.
But only for one day, and then it's all over.
Over?
Repeated the fly.
What is the meaning of all over? Are you all over too?
No, I shall very likely live for thousands of your days, and my day is whole seasons long. Indeed, it is so long that you could never reckon it out.
No? Then I don't understand you. You may have thousands of my days, but I have thousands of moments in which I can be merry and happy. Does all the beauty of the world cease when you die?
No, replied the tree. It will certainly last much longer, infinitely longer than I can even think of.
Oh, well then,
said the little fly.
We have the same time to live, only we reckon differently.
And the little creature danced and floated in the air, rejoicing in her delicate wings of gauze and velvet, rejoicing in the balmy breezes, laden with the fragrance of clover fields and wild roses, elder blossoms and honeysuckle. From the garden hedges, wild thyme, primroses, and mint. And the scent of all these was so strong that the perfume almost intoxicated the little fly. The long and beautiful day had been so full of joy and sweet delights that when the sun sank low, it felt tired of all its happiness and enjoyment. Its wings could sustain it no longer, and gently and slowly it glided down upon the soft, waving blades of grass, nodded its little head as well as it could nod, and slept peacefully and sweetly. The fly was dead. Poor little ephemera, said the oak. What a terribly short life. And so, on every summer day the dance was repeated, the same questions asked, and the same answers given. The same thing was continued through many generations of ephemera. All of them felt equally merry and equally happy. The oak remained awake through the morning of spring, the noon of summer, and the evening of autumn. Its time of rest, its night drew nigh. Winter was coming. Already the storms were singing, "Good night, good night." Here fell a leaf, and there fell a leaf. "We will rock you and lull you. Go to sleep, go to sleep. We will sing you to sleep and shake you to sleep, and it will do your old twigs good. They will even crackle with pleasure. Sleep sweetly, sleep sweetly. It is your 365th night. Correctly speaking, you are but a youngster in the world. Sleep sweetly. The clouds will drop snow upon you, which will be quite a coverlid, warm and sheltering to your feet. Sweet sleep to you, and pleasant dreams." And there stood the oak, stripped of all of its leaves, left to rest during the whole of a long winter, and to dream many dreams of events that had happened in its life, as in the dreams of men. The great tree had once been small, indeed. In its cradle it had been an acorn. According to human computation, it was now in the 4th century of its existence. It was the largest and best tree in the forest. Its summit towered above all the other trees and could be seen far out at sea, so that it served as a landmark to the sailors. It had no idea how many eyes looked eagerly for it. In its topmost branches, the wood pigeon built her nest, and the cuckoo carried out as usual vocal performances, and his well-known notes echoed amid the boughs. And in autumn, when the leaves looked like beaten copper plates, the birds of passage would come and rest upon the branches before taking their flight across the sea. But now it was winter. The tree stood leafless, so that everyone could see how crooked and bent were the branches that sprang forth from the trunk. Crows and rooks came by turns and sat on them, and talked of the hard times which were beginning, and how difficult it was in winter to obtain food. It was just about Holy Christmas time that the tree dreamed a dream. The tree had, doubtless, a kind of feeling that the festive time had arrived, and in his dream fancied he heard the bells ringing from all the churches round, and yet it seemed to him to be a beautiful summer's day, mild and warm. His mighty summit was crowned with spreading fresh green foliage. The sunbeams played among the leaves and branches, and the air was full of fragrance from herb and blossom. Painted butterflies chased each other. The summer flies danced around him, as if the world had been created merely for them to dance and be merry in. All that had happened to the tree during every year of his life seemed to pass before him, as in a festive procession. He saw the knights of olden times and the noble ladies ride by through the wood on their gallant steeds, with plumes waving in their hats and falcons on their wrists. The hunting horn sounded and the dogs barked. He saw hostile warriors in colored dresses and glittering armor, with spear and halberd, pitching their tents and anon striking them. The watchfires again blazed, and men sang and slept under the hospitable shelter of the tree. He saw lovers meet in quiet happiness near him in the moonshine, and carve the initials of their names in the grayish-green bark on his trunk. Once, but long years had intervened since then, guitars and Aeolian harps had been hung on his boughs by merry travelers. Now they seemed to hang there again, and he could hear their marvelous tones. The wood pigeons cooed as if to explain the feelings of the tree, and the cuckoo called out to tell him how many summer days he had yet to live. Then it seemed as if new life was thrilling through every fiber of root and stem and leaf, rising even to the highest branches. The tree felt itself stretching and spreading out, while through the root, beneath the earth, ran the warm vigor of life. As he grew higher and still higher, with increased strength, his topmost boughs became broader and fuller, and in proportion to his growth, so was his self-satisfaction increased, and with it arose a joyous longing to grow higher and higher, to reach even to the warm, bright sun itself. Already had his topmost branches pierced the clouds, which floated beneath them like troops of birds of passage, or large white swans. Every leaf seemed gifted with sight, as if it possessed eyes to see. The stars became visible in broad daylight, large and sparkling, like clear and gentle eyes. They recalled to the memory the well-known look in the eyes of a child, or in the eyes of lovers who had once met beneath the branches of the old oak. These were wonderful and happy moments for the old tree, full of peace and joy. And yet, amidst all this happiness, the tree felt a yearning, longing desire that all the other trees, bushes, herbs, and flowers beneath him might be able also to rise higher as he had done, and to see all this splendor and experience the same happiness. The grand majestic oak could not be quite happy in the midst of his enjoyment, while all the rest, both great and small, were not with him. And this feeling of yearning trembled through every branch, through every leaf, as warmly and fervently as if they had been the fibers of a human heart. The summit of the tree waved to and fro, and bent downwards as if in his silent longing he sought for something. Then there came to him the fragrance of thyme, followed by the more powerful scent of honeysuckle and violets, and he fancied he heard the note of the cuckoo. At length his longing was satisfied. Up through the clouds came the green summits of the forest trees, and beneath him the oak saw them rising and growing higher and higher. Bush and herb shot upward, and some even tore themselves up by the roots to rise more quickly. The birch tree was the quickest of all. Like a lightning flash, the slender stem shot upwards in a zigzag line, the branches spreading around it like green gauze and banners. Every native of the wood, even to the brown and feathery rushes, grew with the rest, while the birds ascended with the melody of a song. On a blade of grass that fluttered in the air like a long green ribbon sat a grasshopper, cleaning his wings with his legs. May beetles hummed, the bees murmured, the birds sang, each in his own way. The air was filled with the sound of song and gladness. "But where is the little blue flower that grows by the water?" asked the oak. "And the purple bellflower, and the daisy?" You see, the oak wanted to have them all with him.
"Here we are here,"
sounded in voice and song. "But the beautiful time of last summer, where is that? And the lilies of the valley, which last year covered the earth with their bloom, and the wild apple tree with its lovely blossoms, and all the glory of the wood, which has flourished year after year. Even what may have but now sprouted forth could be with us here."
We are here,
sounded voices higher in the air, as if they had flown there beforehand. "Why, this is beautiful, too beautiful to be believed," said the oak in a joyful tone. "I have them all here, both great and small. Not one has been forgotten. Can such happiness be imagined?" It seemed almost impossible. "In heaven, with the eternal God, it can be imagined, and it is possible," sounded the reply through the air. And the old tree, as it still grew upwards and onwards, felt that his roots were loosening themselves from the earth. "It is right so. It is best," said the tree. "No fetters can hold me now. I can fly up to the very highest point in light and glory, and all I love are with me, both small and great. All are here." Such was the dream of the old oak, and while he dreamed, a mighty storm came rushing over land and sea at the holy Christmas time. The sea rolled in great billows towards the shore. There was a cracking and crushing heard in the tree. The root was torn from the ground just at the moment when in his dream he fancied it was being loosened from the earth. He fell. His 365 years were passed as the single day of the ephemera. On the morning of Christmas Day, when the sun rose, the storm had ceased. From all the churches sounded the festive bells, and from every hearth Even of the smallest hut rose the smoke into the blue sky, like the smoke from the festive thank offerings on the Druids' altars. The sea gradually became calm, and on board a great ship that had withstood the tempest during the night, all the flags were displayed as a token of joy and festivity. "The tree is down! The old oak! Our landmark on the coast!" exclaimed the sailors. "It must have fallen in the storm of last night. Who can replace it? Alas, no one!" This was a funeral oration over the old tree, short but well meant. There it lay, stretched on the snow-covered shore, and over it sounded the notes of a song from the ship, a song of Christmas joy, and of the redemption of the soul of man, and of the eternal life through Christ's atoning blood. Sing aloud on the happy morn, all is fulfilled, for Christ is born. With songs of joy let us loudly sing, hallelujahs to Christ our King. Thus sounded the old Christmas carol, and everyone on board the ship felt his thoughts elevated through the song and the prayer, even as the old tree had felt lifted up in its last beautiful dream on that Christmas morn. The ABC Book. Once there was a man who had written some new rhymes for the ABC book. 2 lines for each letter, just as in the old ABC book. He believed the old rhymes were too antiquated, that something new was needed, and he thought well indeed of his own rhymes. His new ABC book was still only in handwriting, and already it had been placed beside the old printed one in the great bookcase where there stood many books, both of knowledge and for amusement. But the old ABC book didn't want to be a neighbor to the new one, and therefore had sprung down from the shelf, and at the same time had given the new one a push, so that it, as well as the old one, now lay on the floor with all its loose leaves scattered about. The old ABC book lay open at the first page, and that is the most important page, for there all the letters, large and small, are displayed. That one page contains on it the essence of all the books that were ever written. It contains the alphabet, that wonderful army of signs which rules the world. Truly a marvelous power they have. Everything depends on the order in which they are commanded to stand. They have the power to give life or to kill, to gladden and sadden. Separately, they mean nothing, but marshaled and ranked into word formations, what can they not accomplish? Yes, when God put them into man's thoughts, human strength became inferior to that which lay in the alphabet, and we yielded with a deep bow. There then they lay now facing upward, and the cock, which was pictured at the big A of the alphabet, gleamed with feathers of red, blue, and green. Proudly he puffed himself up and ruffled his plumage, for he knew how important the letters were, and that he was the only living thing among them. When he found the old ABC book had fallen open on the floor, he flapped his wings, flew out, and perched himself on a corner of the bookcase. There he preened himself with his beak and crowed loudly and long. Every single book in the case, all of which would stand day and night as if in a trance when nobody was reading them, was roused by his trumpet call. Then the cock spoke out loudly and clearly about the way the worthy old ABC book had been insulted.
"Everything has to be new and different nowadays,"
he said.
"Everything has to be advanced. Children are so wise that they can read before they have even learned the alphabet. They should have something new," said the man who wrote these new verses, sprawling there on the floor. "I know them all by heart. He admires them so much that I have heard him read them aloud more than 10 times over. No, I prefer my own, the good old rhymes with xanthus for X, and with the pictures that belong to them. I'll fight for them and crow for them. Every book in the case here knows them very well. Now, I'll read aloud these new rhymes. I'll try to read them patiently, and I know that we'll agree they're worthless."
Had Adam obeyed, he'd not have to leave the garden where first dwelt he and Eve. The bank is a place where you put your money. The bee is an insect that gathers honey.
"Now that verse I find profoundly insipid," said the cock, "but I'll read on."
Columbus sailed the ocean to the distant shore, and then the earth became twice as big as before. About the kingdom of Denmark there's a saying which goes, God's hand protects it, as every Dane knows.
"That many people will consider beautiful,"
said the cock.
"but I don't. I see nothing beautiful about it. But I'll go on."
The elephant has a heavy step, though young in heart and full of pep. The moon above feels at its best when an eclipse gives its face a rest. It is easier to sail a boat than to teach manners to a goat. Hurrah is a word we often hear. How often does the deed merit such cheer?
"How will a child understand that?" said the cock. "I suppose they'll put on the title page, ABC's book for big people and little people. But the big people have something else to do besides read the rhymes in ABC books, and the little people won't be able to understand them. There is a limit to everything. But to continue,
we have a job to do on earth, till earth becomes our final birth."
"Wha- Now that's crude,"
said the cock. When kittens grow up, we call them cats, and hope they'll catch our mice and rats. The savage lion has much more sense than the arty critic's stinging offense.
"How are you going to explain that to the children?"
said the cock. The golden morning sun arose, but not because of the cock's crows.
"Now it's getting personal,"
said the cock.
"But then I'm in excellent company. I'm in company with the sun. Let's go on."
We are skipping the letter N. If you need to finish this alphabet out, just seek the story out and read it for yourself. The best of leaves, you know its name? The dove's olive leaf of Bible fame. That peace may ever reign, far and near, is indeed a hope we all hold dear. A queen is a lady of royal position. A quack is a fake and not a position. One may be round and well extended, but that doesn't mean one is well descended. Be not a braggart, be honest and true, though many swine in the forest belong to you.
Will you permit me to crow?
said the cock.
It tries your strength, reading so much. I must catch my breath.
And then he crowed, shrill as a trumpet of brass, and it was a great pleasure to listen to for the cock.
I'll go on.
The tea kettle in the kitchen will always belong, and yet to the tea urn it gives its song. Our universe will always be, through ages to eternity.
Now that is meant to be deep,
said the cock.
It's so deep, I can't get to the bottom of it.
A washerwoman will wash and scrub until there's nothing left but the tub.
Now, it's certainly impossible that he can have found anything new for X.
In the sea of marriage are rocks of strife, as Socrates found with Xantippe, his wife.
He would have to take Xantippe. Xanthus is much better.
Under Yggdrasil tree the gods sat every day, but the tree is dead, and the gods have gone away.
Now we are almost through,
said the cock.
That's a relief. I'll continue on.
Zephyr in Danish is a west wind so cold it penetrates fur and skin, we're told.
That's it, but that's not the end of it. Now it will be printed and then it will be read. It will be offered in place of the noble old rhymes in my book. What says this assembly? Learned and not so learned. Single volumes and collected works? What says the alphabet? I have spoken. Now let others act.
The book stood still, and the bookcase stood still, but the cock flew back to his place at the capital A in the old ABC book and looked proudly around.
I have spoken well, and I have crowed well. The new ABC book can't do anything like that. It will certainly die. In fact, it's dead already, for it has no cock.
And there we have it. Thank you all for sticking around once again for another hour-plus long installment of the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen. Again, we ask that you please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Please share this channel to your social media pages, or simply show it to your friends or family. If there's someone in your life who's having a hard time sleeping, we are going to go ahead and offer you a money-back guarantee that our videos will help them get to sleep easier and faster than many of the other videos out there. You can take that to the bank. Thank you again for your time. Take care of each other out there, and as always, please have sweet dreams.